Hello, and thank you for joining me again. For my second lecture, I want to discuss science and Indigenous knowledge. On the agenda today, we're going to be going over environmental stewardship, what it is and why it's important. I'm going to tell you a story of the uses of a moose, also two ways of knowing, what is Indigenous knowledge, an example of Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous indicators, transfer of knowledge, Nipi Okama, water is boss, conservation, research, OCAP, and opportunities for partnership. Environmental stewardship is a concept that involves the responsible management and care of the environment to ensure it can sustain future generations. It's about finding a balance between human needs and the health of our ecosystems. At its core, environmental stewardship focuses on sustainability, preserving the Earth's biodiversity, ecosystems, and resources so they're available for future generations. For Indigenous communities, stewardship is deeply rooted in teachings and traditional knowledge. It reflects a respect for natural laws and the interconnectedness of all living things. The Seven Generations philosophy, for example, reminds us to consider the impacts of our decisions on both the past and future generations. Stewardship is not just about the environment, it's about honoring our relationships with the land, water, and living beings. Key practices of environmental stewardship include conservation efforts such as protecting wildlife and restoring ecosystems, using land and water sustainably, and addressing global issues like pollution and climate change. It also involves reducing our environmental footprint and creating innovative solutions to protect natural resources. Why is this important? Beyond preserving nature, environmental stewardship is critical for addressing challenges like biodiversity loss, climate change, and resource scarcity. It's about creating a future where both people and the planet can thrive. But stewardship just isn't about the responsibility of governments or organizations. It requires collective effort. Every individual has a role to play in ensuring a healthy, sustainable environment. As we move forward, environmental stewardship reminds us that we are not separate from nature but a part of it. Protecting the environment is not just an obligation, it's a shared commitment that ensures a better future for all. Why is it important? Once again, environmental stewardship is about respecting and responsibly managing natural resources to ensure they're sustained for future generations. Environmental stewardship is essential for ensuring the sustainability of natural resources and ecosystems. It's not just about conservation, it's about respecting the balance of nature and taking only what is needed in a way that ensures the future of all living beings. Indigenous practices provide a powerful example of what true environmental stewardship looks like. Take the relationship between Indigenous people and the moose, for example. When a moose is hunted, nothing is wasted. The meat, including the guts, is used for food to nourish families. The skin is transformed into clothing, providing protection against harsh climates. Moose hair is intricately woven into moose tufting art, preserving cultural traditions. The bones are shaped into tools, moose brains are used to soften the hides for further use, and the antlers are even employed during hunting to mimic rutting behaviors. It's not just about using the resources. Stewardship also means thinking about sustainability. For this reason, Indigenous peoples traditionally never hunt female moose. This ensures that populations can rebuild and that future generations will also have access to this vital resource. This way of life reflects a deeper respect for nature, where the interconnectedness of all things are acknowledged. It's a reminder that when we take something from the environment, we must do so responsibly, ensuring that nothing is wasted and that we give back to nature in meaningful ways. Environmental stewardship, as shown through these Indigenous practices, teaches us how to live in harmony with the natural world. It's a philosophy and a way of life that we can all learn from and create a sustainable and respectful relationship with the environment. Two-eyed seeing, or itapdamuk, is a guiding principle brought forward by the Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall. It teaches us to view the world through two complementary lenses. One, see the strengths of Indigenous knowledge systems, which are rooted in spirituality, interconnectedness, and community. The other sees the strength of Western knowledge, with its focus on objectivity and technological advancements. By learning to weave these perspectives together, we can foster collaboration and innovation that respects and benefits all. This principle is particularly valuable in addressing complex challenges in health, education, environmental management, and policymaking. Importantly, it calls for mutual respect and humility, avoiding the dominance of one worldview over another. Two-wide seeing also aligns with the Mi'kmaq understanding of Nitukulimik, which emphasizes living in harmony with nature and each other. By applying this principle, we can ensure that our actions today create a better future for future generations. Indigenous knowledge is the foundation for our survival and way of life. It is not something that can be bought or sold. Instead, it's the life lessons and wisdoms passed down through generations that have allowed our people to live in harmony with the land. This knowledge isn't written in books or learned in a classroom. It's shared directly from person to person through showing, storytelling, and hands-on experiences. As children, we are brought out into the land where we are taught the skills necessary to survive and thrive. These skills are the result of countless trials and errors by those who came before us, our ancestors, who found methods that worked and passed them down to ensure our survival. For example, learning how to navigate the seasons, hunt, gather, and prepare food, or you even use plants for medicine, are all teachings rooted in this knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is more than just a set of practical skills. It's a living connection to our history, culture, and environment. It teaches us respect for nature and reminds us of our place within it. It fosters resilience, preserves traditions, and ensures that future generations will have the tools they need to carry on. This knowledge has sustained us for generations and continues to be the cornerstone of who we are as people. It is a gift, a responsibility, and a way of life that ensures the balance between humanity and the natural world. An example of traditional knowledge that I use, which is passed down from my family, is what bears do in the fall. Bears go to sleep usually before the leaves fall. This is because the dens in which the bears sleep are less noticeable before the leaves fall. If a bear goes into a den later, the other animals can smell it due to the winds that come during fall and falling leaves. They don't cover the bear's den. In August, the bears will eat white berries, also known as bear berries, to build up their fat reserves. Once they're full of berries, they will then travel to sloughs, like bogs or kind of peatlands, where this particular plant grows. When we see them eating this plant, we know that fall is coming soon because this plant prevents the berries in their stomach from fermenting when they're hibernating. We notice these little things and we know that fall is coming. Well, obviously, fall comes every year, but using this method can pinpoint the time when the leaves will change and also when the moose will start to begin to run. With this knowledge, you can have an idea of when to harvest plants, when to winterize your home, and when the birds will start flying south. Indigenous indicators are natural clues that Indigenous peoples have relied upon for countless generations to navigate their relationship with the environment. These indicators are derived from deep observations and understandings of the natural world and are integral to traditional ecological knowledge. They help Indigenous communities interpret changes in weather, seasons, ecosystems, and wildlife, enabling them to adapt and thrive. For example, observing animal behavior is a common indicator. The timing of bird migrations, hibernation of bears, or the movement of fish can signal shifts in seasons or the availability of resources. Similarly, plant cycles, such as the blooming of flowers or the ripening of berries, indicate when it's time to harvest or prepare for seasonal changes. Even changes in water levels, clarity, or the presence of certain aquatic species can reveal the health of an ecosystem or signal broader environmental shifts. What makes Indigenous indicators unique is their ability to detect subtle changes in the environment long before scientific instruments might. For instance, an Indigenous knowledge holder may notice that a particular bird species has the latest migration, signaling a shift in seasonal patterns that can impact hunting, fishing, or planting cycles. These observations are more than just practical tools, they reflect a deep connection with the land and a commitment to living in harmony with nature. The importance of indicators extends beyond their cultural value. They are vital for sustainability and environmental stewardship. By understanding and respecting these indicators, we can learn how to better manage our natural resources and adapt to changes in rapidly evolving climate. Indigenous indicators remind us that nature speaks, we just need to learn how to listen. On-the-land teachings are at the heart of Indigenous education and a vital way of passing knowledge from one generation to the next. This approach isn't about reading from a book or sitting in a classroom. It's about learning through storytelling, experience, and a deep connection to the land. It's immersive and practical, ensuring that the lessons are not just heard, but lived. Stories are the primary tools we use to teach. Elders share stories to explain why things are done a certain way, to teach about safety, or to instill values like respect and humility. These stories often carry important lessons about survival, the environment, and relationships with others. For example, a story about a moose hunt might include practical details about tracking and harvesting, but it also conveys the importance of gratitude, resourcefulness, and ensuring nothing goes to waste. Experience is equally essential. Skills like hunting, fishing, trapping, gathering, and crafting are taught by doing. As children, we are brought out into the land and shown how to set traps, identify plants, or read animal tracks. This hands-on approach not only builds competence, but also instills confidence and a sense of responsibility for the environment. The land itself is a teacher. Observing the behavior of animals, the cycles of plants, and the changes of weather provides valuable knowledge that ensures its survival and sustainability. For example, learning when to harvest berries or when the mooses are rutting comes from years of watching and understanding these cycles. On-the-land teachings are more than just about survival. They're about building a relationship with the land and understanding our place within it. They teach us respect, patience, and the importance of living in balance. By combining stories and direct experience, this method ensures that knowledge is not just preserved, but actively lived and practiced, keeping our traditions alive for generations to come. The use of traditional knowledge is useful when we consider another way to view or explain something holistically. And by that, I mean, while something can be black and white, the holistic view uses all the colors to make up white or the absence of colors to make up black. I want to go over some concepts or work to consider the bigger picture. Nipi Okama means water is boss. It governs everything. For Indigenous peoples, water is not just a resource, but a lifeline for culture, sustenance, and the exercise of treaty rights. Water is a resource that is ever fluctuating, and combined with climate change, water is a resource that is slowly becoming limited for many areas. I'd like to introduce you to two concepts, Aboriginal base flow and Aboriginal extreme flow, which were developed to measure and protect specific water levels needed for the continuation of these rights. Aboriginal base flow represents the minimum water level required for Indigenous peoples to fully practice their treaty rights. This includes fishing, trapping, hunting, and accessing traditional lands and cultural sites by boat or other means. For example, the Athabasca River is a key waterway for Indigenous communities, providing both transportation and sustenance. Without sufficient flow, these activities become impossible, directly infringing on treaty rights. On the other hand, Aboriginal extreme flow identifies a critical point where water levels are so low that widespread disruption occurs. At this level, access to traditional practices are almost entirely lost. Ecosystems collapse, and cultural connection to water is severely impacted. This threshold is a warning sign. If water levels fall to AXF, urgent action is needed to restore balance. Both ABF and AXF are essential for holding governments accountable for water management in regions affected by industrial activities, climate change, and other pressures. They ensure that treaty rights are not just acknowledged, but actively protected, preserving the ecosystems that Indigenous people have relied upon for generations. These thresholds also highlight the broader significance of water stewardship. When water flows are maintained at sustainable levels, they don't just protect treaty rights, they protect biodiversity, the health of ecosystems, and the balance of life itself. Water is boss, and through ABF and AXF, we ensure that it continues to sustain us all. For Indigenous people, conservation is more than just a strategy to protect wildlife. It is a way of living that recognizes the interconnectedness of all life. When we talk about conserving species like the buffalo and caribou, we're also talking about preserving relationships with the land, sustaining cultural practices, and ensuring the balance of ecosystems for future generations. Buffalo, or bison, hold an immense cultural and spiritual significance for many Indigenous nations. Once nearly driven to extinction by colonial practices, buffalo are now being reintroduced to traditional lands through Indigenous-led initiatives. These efforts aim to restore not just a species, but also cultural traditions tied to the buffalo. For example, ceremonies, teachings, and practices that center on the buffalo are being revitalized alongside conservation programs. The buffalo's return symbolizes resilience, healing, and the reclamation of Indigenous stewardship. Similarly, caribou are critical to the survival and culture of many northern Indigenous communities. These animals have been a source of food, clothing, and tools for generations, but their populations are now under threat due to habitat destruction, climate change, and industrial development. Indigenous communities are leading the charge in advocating for caribou habitat protection, promoting sustainable hunting practices, and holding industries accountable for the impacts of resource extraction. Efforts like this ensure that caribou remain a sustainable resource and a vital part of cultural traditions. Conservation isn't just about the animals, it's about maintaining a way of life. The buffalo and caribou are central to ceremonies, stories, and teachings that connect people to the land and to each other. By protecting these species, Indigenous peoples are safeguarding their cultural heritage while also promoting biodiversity and ecological resilience. Conservation reflects our responsibility to the natural world and ensures that future generations can benefit from this relationship. Getting involved in research for conservation and environmental work in partnership with Indigenous communities is a meaningful way to contribute to the sustainability and reconciliation. Indigenous peoples have led the way in protecting natural resources, and collaboration can amplify these efforts while addressing critical issues like climate change, resource management, and sustainable community development. One way to participate is by contributing to the development of criteria like Aboriginal base flow or Aboriginal extreme flow, which quantify water levels needed to maintain treaty rights and ecosystem health. Similarly, Indigenous-led frameworks like the Water Quality Guidelines for Indigenous Use focuses on ensuring that water resources meet communities' cultural, spiritual, and practical needs. These criteria are developed through a combination of Indigenous knowledge and Western science, and they require researchers who are willing to engage in respectful co-design partnerships. Beyond water management, there are opportunities to collaborate on research related to climate change, sustainable land use, and the creation of green communities. For example, working with Indigenous nations to develop adaptive strategies for changing climates can include integrating renewable energy solutions, restoring ecosystems, and creating policies prioritizing sustainable practices. The first step is getting involved is to build trust and relationships with Indigenous communities. This means learning about treaty rights, understanding Indigenous protocols, and respecting the cultural significance of the land and its resources. Research should not be extractive or one-sided. It should have participation, prioritizing the community's needs, and ensuring that the outcomes benefit Indigenous peoples directly. Finally, you can play a role in turning research into action by supporting policy changes and advocating for the implementation of Indigenous-led guidelines. Whether you're a student, scientist, or policymaker, there's a place for you in this work. By combining your skills with Indigenous knowledge and leadership, you can help create solutions that not only benefit Indigenous communities, but the environment and society as a whole. When working with Indigenous communities, OCAP, ownership, control, access, and possession, is not just a guideline, it's a requirement. These principles ensure that Indigenous peoples have authority to their own data and knowledge, reinforcing their sovereignty and protecting their cultural and intellectual property. Let's break it down. Ownership means that all data collected about Indigenous communities belongs to them. Just as they own their land and resources, they also have ownership over their knowledge, whether it's traditional ecological knowledge, health data, or community records. Control ensures that Indigenous communities have the power to decide how their data is collected, interpreted, or shared. They should always have a say in the research process, from the design of the project and the use of its findings. This principle is especially important in avoiding the historical misuse of Indigenous knowledge by external researchers. Access gives Indigenous communities full access to any data or information collected about them. This means that researchers or organizations cannot withhold findings or use the data without ensuring the community benefits directly from it. Finally, possession ensures that the data is managed and stored in a way that aligns with the community's values and priorities. It protects the data from being misused or exploited, reinforcing the community's control over its own information. Why is OCAP so important? Because it fosters trust and respect in partnerships with Indigenous communities. By following OCAP, you ensure that the research and projects are conducted ethically and in a way that benefits the community. It also prevents extractive practices where data is taken and used without providing any value to the people it came from. In short, OCAP is about doing things the right way, respecting Indigenous sovereignty and creating meaningful collaborations, and prioritizing the well-being of the communities you work with. Every time you engage with an Indigenous nation, you need to apply OCAP principles. Not only does this align with reconciliation, but it also creates a foundation for trust and long-lasting partnerships. When it comes to building meaningful partnerships with Indigenous communities, there are numerous funding opportunities available to support collaborative research and projects. These grants emphasize the integration of Indigenous knowledge and Western science, fostering solutions that benefit both communities and the environment. One key opportunity is the First Nations Environmental Contaminants Program, which provides up to $125,000 over 2 years for primary research proposals and $25,000 for risk communication proposals. This program supports partnerships between First Nations and scientists to identify and address environmental concerns in Indigenous communities. It is an excellent avenue for researchers looking to make a tangible impact in collaboration with Indigenous nations. Another significant program is the NSERC Promo Science Grant, which offers up to $200,000 per year for up to 3 years. This grant focuses on promoting STEM education among youth, particularly those from underrepresented groups like Indigenous communities. It is an opportunity for professionals to engage with youth, inspiring the next generation to explore and excel in STEM fields. For those interested in climate change, the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program provides $6 million annually to fund Indigenous-led projects. These initiatives blend Indigenous knowledge with Western science to monitor and respond to climate change impacts, offering hands-on opportunities for community members and researchers alike. The Climate Change and Health Adaptation Program supports First Nations and Inuit communities in addressing health challenges related to climate change. Funding varies by projects, allowing the communities to adapt to changing conditions through localized solutions. Additionally, the Indigenous-led Natural Climate Solutions Initiative, a part of a $180 million fund, supports projects that conserve and restore ecosystems, capturing carbon, and combating climate change. These programs are more than just financial support. They're pathways to reconciliation, sustainability, and knowledge exchange. By leveraging these opportunities, researchers and professionals can create meaningful community-led solutions that address some of today's most pressing challenges. As we conclude, let's reflect on the key themes we explored today. Environmental stewardship is about maintaining the delicate balance between human needs and the natural world. For Indigenous peoples, it's more than just a practice, it's a way of life rooted in respect, reciprocity, and sustainability. Through the story of the moose, we learn how nothing is wasted and how careful attention to nature ensures harmony with the environment. It teaches us that every action we have has a ripple effect. We've also discussed two ways of knowing, Indigenous knowledge and Western science. Both are valuable, but Indigenous knowledge offers unique insights born from generations of observation, storytelling, and lived experience. An example of Indigenous knowledge, such as observing bears to predict seasonal changes, demonstrates how closely tied this knowledge is to survival and ecological understanding. Similarly, Indigenous indicators like animal behaviors and plant cycles show us how to interpret nature's signs to make informed decisions. Transfer of knowledge is central to Indigenous cultures, where lessons are passed down through stories and hands-on teachings, ensuring that traditions and skills continue. Water, a fundamental resource, reminds us of this balance. Nipi Okama, water is boss, and concepts like Aboriginal base flow and extreme flow highlight the critical need to maintain adequate water levels for treaty rights and ecosystem health. We explored the importance of conservation, looking at how Indigenous communities are leading efforts to restore buffalo and protect caribou, not just for ecological reasons, but also to preserve culture and traditions. We also discussed the role of research, emphasizing how partnerships with Indigenous communities can lead to meaningful projects addressing climate change, sustainable development, and environmental protection. As professionals, it's crucial to work ethically and respectfully. The OCAP principles, ownership, control, access, and possession, ensures that Indigenous sovereignty over data and knowledge is maintained. These principles build trust and create equitable partnerships. Finally, we reviewed opportunities and funding programs that enable collaboration, such as the First Nations Environmental Contaminants Program, NSERC Promo Science, and the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program. In closing, Indigenous knowledge and stewardship principles offer invaluable lessons in living in harmony with the environment. By respecting these teachings and working collaboratively, we can protect the land, water, and resources, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. Reconciliation isn't just about acknowledgement, it's about action. Thank you for listening to me for these two lectures. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me through my email at rachel.graham@mcfngir.ca. Thank you.